Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, not to the thunder of battle or the intrigue of royal courts, but to a much quieter, gentler corner of history. Imagine this. You're approaching a small, timber frame house nestled on the edge of a budding colonial settlement. The sun, a lazy orange orb, is just beginning its slow descent, casting long, sleepy shadows across the dusty path. As you draw closer, a soft murmur reaches your ears, a symphony of quiet chatter, the gentle rustle of fabric, and the almost imperceptible snip, snip of shears. A faint, comforting scent of beeswax and warm linen drifts out from the open windows, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil after a recent, soft rain. It's an evening gathering, yes, but not for dancing or boisterous games. No, tonight, you're invited to a quilting bee, a cornerstone of early American domestic life, where the pace is slow, the company is warm, and the only real danger is falling asleep right there on a pile of unfinished quilt blocks. You probably won't survive the sheer lack of dramatic tension. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling up to it, drop your location and what time it is for you right now in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step across the threshold, and the soft glow of candlelight, not yet fully necessary but already casting a warm, flickering embrace, greets you. The air inside is thick with the scent of humanity, not unpleasant, mind you, but a lived-in warmth, a subtle blend of wood smoke from the hearth, the faint sweetness of drying herbs hanging from rafters, and that ever-present aroma of fabric. Women, mostly, are gathered around a large wooden frame, their heads bowed in concentration, their hands moving with a practiced, rhythmic grace. This isn't a quick project, it's a marathon of meticulous detail, a testament to patience and shared effort. You might notice one woman, perhaps the matriarch of the house, gently rocking a cradle with one foot while her hands expertly guide a needle through layers of cloth. The quiet hum of conversation is almost a lullaby, stories unfolding in hushed tones, interspersed with soft sighs and the occasional, almost imperceptible chuckle. This gentle symphony of domesticity is a stark contrast to the rough and tumble world outside. It's a space where time seems to slow, where the urgent demands of survival recede, replaced by the calming rhythm of needle and thread. One mainstream historical fact you'll quickly glean is that quilting bees were not just about making blankets. They were essential social events for women in isolated communities. They provided a rare opportunity for connection, shared labor, and the exchange of news and gossip, much like a modern-day book club, but with far more practical output. A quirky tidbit you might observe is the sheer variety of fabric scraps being used. There's a piece of faded calico from an old dress, a bit of sturdy homespun from a worn-out shirt, even a fragment of what looks suspiciously like a repurposed flour sack. Nothing, absolutely nothing, goes to waste here. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for these gatherings was communal efficiency or simply the desperate human need for companionship in a harsh new world. Regardless, the atmosphere is undeniably one of quiet industry and comforting solidarity, an antidote to the loneliness that often accompanied early colonial life. You find a quiet corner, settle down, and let the gentle rhythm of the quilting bee wash over you. The soft glow of the fire in the hearth adds another layer of warmth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, making the room feel even more intimate and secure. The collective focus on the task at hand is almost meditative, a silent promise of warmth and comfort being stitched into existence, one tiny, deliberate stitch at a time. As your eyes adjust to the soft, flickering light, you begin to truly understand the sheer ingenuity born from scarcity. You see, fabric in early America wasn't something you simply popped down to the local superstore for. Oh no, every scrap, every thread, every piece of cloth had a story, a previous life. Imagine trying to outfit an entire family, from the babes in arms to the grizzled patriarch, when textiles were either laboriously spun and woven at home. A process that took weeks, if not months, of backbreaking work, or imported at exorbitant cost from across the Atlantic. It's enough to make you appreciate your fast fashion habit just a little bit more, isn't it? Here, at the Quilting Bee, you witness the ultimate act of recycling, long before anyone ever thought of blue bins or sustainability movements. You see women meticulously sorting through piles of what, to a modern eye, might look like glorified rags. There are worn-out petticoats, faded shirts, even fragments from old curtains or flour sacks that have been carefully washed, bleached, and cut into usable shapes. Each piece, no matter how small, is examined with an almost reverent precision. This isn't just about thrift, it's about survival. A scrap of fabric might represent a precious gift from a relative in England, a piece of a wedding gown, or even the remnants of a child's first frock. Each snip of the scissors is a calculated decision, ensuring that not an inch of usable material is wasted. You realize that the concept of fast fashion would be utterly alien, perhaps even offensive, to these resourceful women. Their wardrobes were built to last, repaired until they could be repaired no more, and then, finally, repurposed into something new and equally vital. One mainstream historical fact that resonates here is the economic reality. Colonial households often measured their wealth not just in land or livestock, but in bolts of cloth and the family's ability to produce textiles. A well-stocked linen chest was a sign of prosperity and domestic skill. A quirky tidbit you might notice is how some of the scraps still bear faint traces of their former lives. A tiny, faded embroidery from a cuff, or the ghostly outline of a seam where a pocket once was. It's like a secret history embedded within the quilt itself, a whisper of past garments and the people who wore them. You can almost hear the phantom rustle of a forgotten Sunday best or the swish of a hard-working apron. Historians still argue whether the distinct patterns that emerged in early American quilting were purely aesthetic choices or if they served as coded messages, perhaps even secret maps, among communities. While that remains debated, what's clear is the profound connection these women had to their materials. They weren't just working with fabric, they were working with memories, with family histories, and with the very essence of their daily lives. The reverence for material, the refusal to discard anything with potential, is palpable. As you watch, you pick up a small, indigo-dyed scrap. It feels rough, sturdy, a testament to its homespun origins. You can almost feel the calloused hands that spun the yarn, the rhythmic thud of the loom that wove it. There's a certain beauty in its imperfections, in the slight unevenness of the weave, a stark contrast to the uniform perfection of factory-produced cloth. This isn't a fabric of mass production. It's a fabric of individual effort, of painstaking care. The women around you chat softly about where a particular piece came from, who wore it, what occasion it might have graced. It's less a formal history lesson and more a casual, living archive of their shared existence. The act of cutting and arranging these fragments feels almost sacred, transforming humble discards into a coherent, beautiful whole, much like piecing together the fragmented lives of a scattered community. You realize that in their hands, these scraps are not merely fabric. They are threads of a narrative, waiting to be woven into a collective story of resilience and warmth. Now, let's turn our attention to the tools of this trade, which, much like the fabric itself, speak volumes about the era's resourcefulness. Forget your fancy rotary cutters, your self-healing mats, your ergonomically designed scissors. You won't find any of that here. Instead, you see hands, nimble and calloused, guiding simple, well-worn implements. The most striking tool, of course, is the needle. Not the gleaming, perfectly uniform steel needles you might use today, but perhaps a slightly irregular iron needle, hand-forged, or a more precious, imported steel one, carefully guarded. I might be a bit rough, the point not quite as sharp as you're accustomed to, requiring a gentle coaxing rather than a swift pierce through the fabric. You watch as a woman threads her needle, her brow furrowed in concentration. The thread itself is likely homespun linen or cotton, perhaps even silk if the family was particularly affluent. It's thicker, less uniform than modern thread, sometimes prone to tangling, demanding a patience you might find utterly astounding. There's no machine here to do the work. Every single stitch is a deliberate act of human effort. The movement is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Needle in, pull through, loop, needle back, pull through. It's a dance of precision and repetition, a quiet meditation. You can almost feel the slight prick of the needle against your own fingertip, the subtle pull of the thread, the satisfying tug as the stitch settles into place. Beyond the needle and thread, the other tools are equally basic. Scissors, for one, are often large and somewhat clunky, not the sleek, sharp implements we take for granted. They're used not just for fabric, but for countless other household tasks, sharpened regularly on a whetstone. You might see a thimble, perhaps made of brass or even bone, worn smooth from years of protecting weary fingers. It's a silent testament to countless hours of pushing needles through stubborn cloth. A chalk line or a piece of charcoal might be used for marking patterns, far from the precise fabric pens of today. The quilting frame itself, the large wooden structure around which the women gather, is often a simple affair. For sturdy wooden bars held together, perhaps with clamps or pegs, supporting the vast expanse of the quilt. It's a communal workspace, designed for multiple hands to work simultaneously on a single project, fostering both efficiency and camaraderie. One mainstream historical fact is that early American quilting techniques primarily involved hand piecing and hand quilting, meaning every single seam and decorative stitch was made by hand. The advent of the sewing machine was still decades, sometimes centuries, away for the average household. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the way some women, perhaps those with failing eyesight, rely almost entirely on touch to guide their needles, their fingers surprisingly sensitive to the texture and thickness of the fabric layers. It's a skill born of necessity, a quiet mastery of material. Historians still argue whether the widespread adoption of specific quilting patterns, like the log cabin or nine-patch, was due to ease of construction, symbolic meaning, or simply the limited variety of pattern books available at the time. What is undeniable, however, is the sheer manual labor involved. Every finished quilt represents hundreds, if not thousands, of individual stitches, each one a tiny testament to the patience and dedication of its makers. It's a soothing thought, isn't it? The quiet industry, the focus, the sheer absence of any digital distractions. You find yourself almost leaning in, trying to catch the almost imperceptible snick of a needle passing through layers of cloth, a sound of quiet creation. The steady rhythm, the gentle rustling, and the soft murmurs of conversation combine to create a remarkably peaceful soundscape. It's the kind of quiet that lets your mind drift, much like the slow drift of a canoe on a still lake, allowing thoughts to meander without urgency. Beyond the practicalities of fabric and tools, the quilting bee was, at its heart, a profound social institution. For women in early America, life was often isolating. Homes were far apart, travel was arduous, and opportunities for social interaction outside of immediate family were rare. The quilting bee wasn't just a chance to get a blanket made. It was a lifeline, a vital thread connecting women in a scattered community. Imagine the scene. Weeks, even months, might have passed since some of these women last saw a friendly face beyond their own family unit. So, when the invitation to a quilting bee went out, it wasn't just an invitation to work. It was an invitation to reconnect, to share burdens, and to simply exist in the comforting presence of other women. You observe the dynamic around the frame. While hands are busy, tongues are equally so, though in hushed, respectful tones. This is where news was exchanged, faster and more reliably than any Pony Express or gossip column. Have you heard about the new family settling 3 valleys over? One woman might murmur, her needle still dancing. And Martha's oldest, bless her heart, finally found herself a suitor. Every birth, every death, every new arrival, every hardship or triumph in the wider community would be discussed, dissected, and absorbed. It was the original social network, far more robust than any digital platform could ever hope to be, because it was built on physical presence, shared labor, and genuine empathy. This gathering wasn't just for pleasantries, either. It was a space for practical advice. A younger woman, perhaps recently married, might quietly ask an older, more experienced quilter for tips on preserving berries or mending a stubborn tear. Health remedies, child-rearing strategies, agricultural insights, all were topics of whispered conversation. There was an unspoken understanding, a sisterhood forged in shared challenges. If a family was experiencing hardship, the quilting bee might quietly shift focus to produce a quilt specifically for them, a tangible expression of communal support. It was a form of mutual aid, long before formal charities existed, woven directly into the fabric of daily life. One mainstream historical fact is that these gatherings served as critical informal education hubs, transmitting skills and knowledge across generations in a highly practical, hands-on manner. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the subtle nonverbal communication that flows between the women. A shared glance, a sympathetic nod, a gentle squeeze of a hand. So much was understood without a single word needing to be spoken, a testament to deep bonds. Historians still argue whether the apparent deference of younger women to older ones at these bees was purely cultural respect or also a practical acknowledgement of the elders' invaluable experience in a world without instruction manuals. Regardless, the atmosphere is one of shared purpose and quiet camaraderie, a gentle hum of connection that is profoundly soothing. You can almost feel the gentle pulse of shared humanity emanating from the circle, a quiet strength that underpinned the often harsh realities of colonial life. It's a subtle warmth, not just from the fire, but from the collective spirit of these women, creating comfort not only in cloth, but in community. As you continue to observe the quiet industry around you, you begin to notice something truly remarkable. These quilts aren't just practical blankets. They are living documents, woven with stories, memories, and even historical events. Each pattern, each carefully chosen piece of fabric held a deeper meaning, a whispered narrative known only to those who understood its language. This isn't just about covering a bed. It's about preserving a moment in time, one stitch at a time. Think about the sheer variety of quilt patterns that emerged from this era. You might see a log cabin pattern, its central square perhaps made from a piece of a baby's receiving blanket, surrounded by strips of fabric that metaphorically represent the logs of a newly built home. It tells a story of beginnings, of settlement, of building a life from scratch in a new world. Or perhaps a nine-patch, simple yet endlessly versatile, its repetitive squares forming a comforting, predictable rhythm, much like the rhythm of daily life in a rural community. These weren't just random geometric designs. They were visual metaphors for the experiences of the people who created them. One of the most profound aspects of this storytelling through fabric is how it often transcended the purely personal. Quilts could commemorate significant public events, too. A particular pattern might emerge to celebrate a victory in a local skirmish or to honor a beloved community leader. They were a form of textile journalism, silently broadcasting news and sentiment to those who could read their intricate code. Imagine a quilt made to mark the end of the Revolutionary War, with colors and patterns subtly reflecting the new nation's aspirations. These weren't just decorative items. They were historical artifacts, embodying the collective memory of a community. One mainstream historical fact is that many early American quilt patterns, while seemingly abstract, often carried specific names and associations that reflected daily life, nature, or significant events. A quirky tidbit you might learn is that some patterns, particularly those associated with the Underground Railroad, are believed by some historians to have been used as coded messages, guiding escaping enslaved people to freedom. While this specific use is still debated among scholars, the idea that quilts could carry such profound, hidden meanings is undeniably powerful. Historians still argue whether the complexity of some quilt patterns was simply a demonstration of skill, or if it was intentionally designed to be visually challenging, almost like a puzzle, to keep the quilters engaged during long hours of work. Regardless, you feel the weight of these stories, stitched into the very fabric of the quilts, a quiet legacy passed down from generation to generation. It's a comforting thought, isn't it, that even the most mundane objects can hold such deep, resonant narratives? The quiet whispers of the past are woven into every thread, creating a tapestry of human experience that is both tangible and profoundly moving. As you lean back, letting your eyes drift over the various blocks being assembled, you notice the subtle variations even within the same pattern. No two log cabin blocks are exactly alike, reflecting the individuality of the hands that pieced them, the unique scraps of fabric available, and perhaps even the mood of the maker on a particular day. It's a testament to the fact that even within shared traditions, there's always room for personal expression. The slightly uneven stitches, the occasional quirky fabric choice, These aren't flaws, but rather charming signatures, imbuing each quilt with a unique personality. You can almost feel the presence of the women who designed and sewed these stories, their hopes and struggles, their quiet joys and sorrows, all embedded in the colorful squares before you. It's a gentle reminder that history isn't just about grand narratives and famous figures. It's also about the countless, nameless hands that shaped the everyday world, leaving behind a legacy of comfort and quiet resilience. As dusk truly begins to settle, a new challenge emerges, one that would send shivers down the spine of anyone accustomed to modern illumination, light, or rather, the distinct lack thereof. Imagine trying to thread a needle or make a perfectly straight stitch under the flickering, smoky glow of a solitary candle or the faint, dancing light from a fireplace. It's an exercise in patience and precision that makes you appreciate every watt of your electric lighting, doesn't it? You watch as the women lean closer to the light sources, their faces illuminated in warm, shifting amber and shadow. A single tallow candle, perhaps made from animal fat, provides a surprisingly meager pool of light, casting long, wavering shadows across the room. Its flame dances with every slight draft, making the task of stitching even more difficult. If they're fortunate, they might have a whale oil lamp, which, while brighter, also carries the distinct, somewhat pungent aroma of burning oil. You might even hear the soft sizzle of the wick as it consumes the precious fuel. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a fundamental constraint on their work, dictating the pace and the duration of their activity. The concept of eye strain takes on a whole new meaning here. Hours spent squinting in dim light would have been common, leading to tired, aching eyes. You might see a woman occasionally rub her temples or blink slowly, trying to refocus her gaze. It's a quiet testament to their dedication, their willingness to push through physical discomfort for the sake of the finished quilt. The act of stitching in such conditions demands an almost meditative focus, tuning out the surrounding world and concentrating solely on the minute movements of needle and thread within the limited field of light. It's a world where every flicker of illumination is precious, and every moment of good daylight is maximized. One mainstream historical fact is that artificial lighting in colonial America was extremely limited and costly, making activities requiring fine detail often restricted to daylight hours or special, well-lit occasions. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the way some women instinctively position their bodies, angling their work just so, trying to catch every last ray of natural light filtering through a window, even as the sun dips below the horizon. It's an unconscious dance with the fading light. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of simpler, larger quilt block patterns in earlier periods was a direct result of poor lighting conditions, or simply an aesthetic preference that evolved over time. Regardless, as the last vestiges of daylight disappear, the room becomes a tableau of soft, wavering light, making the act of creation feel even more intimate and profound. The gentle crackle of the fire and the low hum of conversation are the only constant sounds, lulling you further into the peaceful scene. You feel a profound sense of gratitude for the abundance of light in your own life, a small, yet significant, luxury. All that meticulous stitching and focused concentration, especially under dim light, certainly builds an appetite. And so, the quilting bee wasn't just about needlework and whispered tales. It was also about sustenance, simple yet hearty fare shared amongst friends and family. This wasn't a gourmet feast, but rather a spread born of necessity and the bounty of the land, designed to keep hands nimble and spirits bright through long hours of work. You might catch the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, perhaps still warm from the hearth oven, its crust golden and inviting. There might be churned butter, creamy and rich, spread thick on slices of that bread. Simplicity was key. Imagine a wooden bowl filled with stewed apples, sweetened perhaps with a touch of molasses or maple syrup, or a dish of dried berries, rehydrated and plump. These were the seasonal gifts that sustained them. You wouldn't find exotic spices or imported delicacies. Instead, the flavors were rooted in the local harvest, a taste of the very soil beneath their feet. Water, fresh from a well, would be readily available, perhaps served in simple earthenware mugs. On special occasions, or as a welcome pick-me-up, a weak cider or a light ale might be offered, brewed gently to refresh rather than inebriate. The emphasis was on nourishment, on providing the energy needed for the intricate work at hand. This sharing of food was another layer of the community bond, a quiet act of hospitality that reinforced connections. It wasn't just about feeding bodies, it was about feeding the spirit of togetherness, a subtle, unspoken affirmation of shared experience. One mainstream historical fact is that communal meals were a fundamental aspect of social gatherings in colonial America, reflecting both practicality and a deeply ingrained culture of hospitality. A quirky tidbit you might notice is how every crumb, every last drop, is treasured. There's no casual waste here. Food is too precious. You might even see a child, eyes wide with anticipation, waiting patiently for a leftover crust of bread or a spoonful of sweet applesauce. Historians still argue whether the precise types of dishes served at Quilting Bees varied significantly by region, reflecting distinct agricultural practices and available ingredients, or if a more universal set of Quilting Bee foods emerged across the colonies. Regardless, the food, humble as it may be, provides a gentle anchor to the present moment, a tangible reminder of the simple comforts that sustain lives in a challenging world. The quiet clinking of spoons against bowls, the soft tearing of bread, and the murmur of appreciation add another layer to the soothing soundscape of the evening. It's a gentle reminder that nourishment comes in many forms, not least of all from shared company and simple, wholesome fare. Amidst the quiet industry of the quilting bee, you might wonder about the youngest members of the household. Where are the children? In an era without dedicated playrooms or endless digital distractions, children were often present, observing, learning, and finding their own ways to occupy themselves within the adult world. They weren't shunted off to a separate room. They were part of the fabric of daily life, even during these seemingly adult-centric gatherings. You might see younger children, perhaps toddlers, toddling around the edges of the room, playing quietly with homemade toys, a wooden doll, a carved animal, or even just a collection of polished stones. Their play is often mimetic, mirroring the adult activities they observe. A little girl might sit with her own tiny piece of fabric and a blunt needle, mimicking the stitching motions of her mother or aunts, already beginning to absorb the rhythms of domestic craft. A small boy might be playing with scraps of wood by the hearth, building a miniature cabin or imagining grand adventures. Their games are quiet, unamplified by electronics, relying instead on imagination and the raw materials of their environment. Older children, particularly girls, would often have specific roles. They might be tasked with keeping the fire stoked, fetching fresh water, or arranging the scraps of fabric into neat piles. This wasn't just about giving them something to do. It was a crucial part of their apprenticeship into adulthood. They learned by observation and by quiet participation, absorbing the skills and social graces necessary for their future roles. You might see a girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, carefully trimming threads from a finished section of the quilt, her small fingers surprisingly adept. It's a silent education, far removed from any formal classroom. One mainstream historical fact is that children in colonial America were integrated into household labor from a very young age, learning essential life skills through active participation in daily tasks. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the almost uncanny quietness of the children. They seem to understand, without being told, that this is a time for hushed voices and focused work, a stark contrast to the boisterous energy often associated with modern childhood. Historians still argue whether this quiet demeanor was a result of strict discipline or simply a natural adaptation to a world where noise was less common and space was often shared intimately. Regardless, the presence of the children adds a subtle layer of life to the scene, a quiet reminder of the ongoing cycle of generations, each learning from the one before, preserving traditions not through grand lessons, but through the gentle, continuous rhythm of shared activity. Their quiet play and watchful eyes are another soothing element in this tranquil historical tableau. While the quilting bee was predominantly a women's domain, you might catch glimpses of the menfolk, flitting through the edges of this soft, domestic scene. Their presence is usually peripheral, a quiet counterpoint to the focused activity of the women. They aren't actively participating in the stitching, of course. That would be quite scandalous for the era. But their lives are intertwined, and their occasional appearances add another layer of authenticity to the setting. You might see a father pop his head in, perhaps to deliver a fresh stack of split firewood for the hearth, his rough, calloused hands contrasting with the delicate movements of the quilters. He might exchange a brief, affectionate glance with his wife or daughter, a silent acknowledgement of the work being done. Or perhaps a son, coming in from the fields, pausing by the doorway, curious about the stories being whispered, or simply drawn by the comforting warmth and soft light of the room. Their interactions are usually brief, almost fleeting, a momentary convergence of two distinct but complementary worlds. Sometimes, a man might settle down in a nearby chair, perhaps whittling a piece of wood or mending a tool, engaged in his own quiet task while the women work. He's not part of the quilting circle, but he is part of the larger household rhythm, his presence a quiet, reassuring anchor. There's a subtle understanding that while their labor is different, it is equally vital to the survival and comfort of the family unit. The soft thud of an axe outside, or the rhythmic clink of a hammer on metal, might occasionally drift through the open window, a gentle reminder of the parallel efforts unfolding just beyond the threshold of the home. One mainstream historical fact is that colonial gender roles were clearly defined, with women primarily responsible for domestic tasks and men for outdoor labor and public life, though these roles often overlapped out of necessity. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the way the conversation among the women might subtly shift, becoming a touch more guarded or perhaps a little quieter when a man enters the room, only to resume its gentle flow once he departs. It's a subtle dance of social etiquette. Historians still argue whether this gendered division of labor created a stronger sense of solidarity among women, leading to more robust female social networks like quilting bees, or if it simply reinforced existing societal norms. Regardless, the occasional male presence serves as a gentle reminder of the broader family unit and the interconnectedness of all their efforts in building a life in the wilderness. It's a nuanced detail, adding depth to the scene, without disrupting the tranquil focus on the needlework. While the primary function of quilts was undeniably utilitarian, to provide warmth in drafty homes, you quickly discern that their purpose extended far beyond mere practicality. These weren't just blankets. They were evolving into canvases, expressions of beauty, and nascent forms of art. The early American quilting bee, in its humble setting, was inadvertently fostering a burgeoning folk art tradition. You notice the deliberate choices being made in fabric arrangement. It's not just random piecing. There's an eye for color, for contrast, for balance. A vibrant red scrap might be placed next to a muted blue, creating a subtle visual pop. A series of squares might be arranged to form a larger, more intricate design, demonstrating a nascent understanding of composition. The women might quietly discuss which fabric sings next to another, or how a particular pattern reads from a distance. This conscious aesthetic decision-making elevates the quilt from simple craft to something more profound. The intricate stitching patterns, too, go beyond purely functional fastening. You see tiny, decorative stitches forming delicate motifs, perhaps a swirling vine, a feather, or a series of concentric circles that add texture and visual interest to the surface. These stitches aren't strictly necessary for holding the layers together, but they are undeniably beautiful, a testament to the quilter's skill and her desire to imbue the object with grace. It's a quiet rebellion against the harshness of daily life, a way to introduce beauty and order into a world that was often chaotic and demanding. One mainstream historical fact is that while early American quilts were born of necessity, they rapidly evolved to incorporate complex patterns and decorative stitching, reflecting a growing appreciation for their aesthetic value. A quirky tidbit you might observe is how a woman might hold up a finished block, turning it this way and that, admiring her handiwork with a quiet, satisfied smile, almost as if she's seeing a painting come to life. Historians still argue whether the geometric nature of many early quilt patterns was a stylistic choice, or simply a practical adaptation to the limitations of cutting and piecing fabric by hand without precise tools. Regardless, what you witness is the slow, deliberate blossoming of art from everyday life, a gentle reminder that creativity finds a way, even in the most challenging of circumstances. The quiet pride in their craftsmanship, the subtle artistry in their choices, is a soothing presence, making the scene feel less like work and more like a shared act of creation. Beyond their aesthetic and communal value, quilts also occasionally transcended their domestic sphere to become a form of economic exchange. In a world where hard currency was often scarce and goods and services were frequently bartered, a well-made quilt could represent a significant asset, a tangible expression of value that could be traded for other necessities. You begin to understand that these creations weren't merely personal treasures. They were sometimes a vital part of a family's financial resilience. Imagine a scenario where a young couple is starting out, needing a cow, or perhaps a new set of tools. They might not have enough cash, but the wife, with the help of her family and neighbors at a quilting bee, could produce a quilt of exquisite quality. This quilt, a product of many hours of labor and precious materials, could then be offered in trade. It was a form of soft currency, accepted because its value was clear, warmth, durability, and the artistry of its creation. You might hear whispers of such transactions. Old Mr. Henderson agreed to mend the roof for a good bed quilt, or they traded 2 of Mary's quilts for a season's worth of flour and salt. It highlights a different economic landscape, one built on trust, community, and the tangible results of skilled labor. This practice also elevated the status of women's work. While traditionally confined to the domestic realm, their ability to create items of such significant value gave them a quiet, yet undeniable, economic power. A woman's skill with a needle and thread was not just a domestic virtue. It was a practical asset that could directly contribute to the family's well-being and prosperity. It demonstrates how, even within rigidly defined gender roles, ingenuity and necessity carved out unexpected avenues for contribution. One mainstream historical fact is that barter and the exchange of goods and services were common economic practices in colonial America, especially in frontier communities where cash was limited. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the particular care taken with certain quilts, perhaps those intended for trade. They might be wrapped in clean linen, their edges meticulously inspected, reflecting their intended status as valuable commodities rather than just everyday use items. Historians still argue whether the precise valuation of quilts in barter systems was standardized within communities or if it varied wildly based on individual negotiation and perceived quality. Regardless, the idea that a piece of comfort could also be a piece of currency adds another fascinating layer to the quiet industry unfolding before you. It's a subtle reminder of the resourcefulness and adaptability required to thrive in a world without modern conveniences, where every skill and every product of labor held a deeper, more profound meaning. While all these layers of meaning, social, artistic, economic, are fascinating, it's crucial to remember the most fundamental purpose of these beautiful textile creations: warmth. In early American homes, especially during harsh winters, a quilt wasn't just a decorative item. It was a matter of survival, a literal shield against the biting cold. You can almost feel the chills seeping through the uninsulated walls, the way the night air would creep through every crack and crevice, making sleep a challenge even under the thickest wool blankets. Imagine trying to sleep in a bedroom where the breath you exhale forms a tiny cloud in front of your face. Fireplaces might offer warmth in one room, but the heat didn't always penetrate to distant sleeping quarters. This is where the layers of a quilt became vital. The 3 distinct layers: the top, often pieced from countless scraps; the batting, typically made of wool, cotton, or even old rags; and the backing, usually a single piece of plain fabric, worked together to trap air, creating an insulating barrier against the cold. It was the original thermal blanket, ingeniously crafted without any high-tech materials. The simple, comforting weight of a quilt was a familiar sensation, a feeling of security against the elements. It wasn't just about physical warmth, either. There was a psychological comfort in knowing that this object, painstakingly created by loving hands, was there to protect you. Each stitch, each patch, represented a tiny act of care, a quiet assurance of safety and well-being. You might even imagine the crackle of dry leaves underfoot outside, or the soft whisper of wind rattling the window panes, sounds that would feel less threatening when snuggled beneath a handmade quilt. One mainstream historical fact is that colonial homes were notoriously difficult to heat, making multiple layers of bedding, including quilts, absolutely essential for comfort and health during colder months. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the sheer thickness of some of the finished quilts. They're not flimsy. They possess a comforting heft, a substantial presence that promises deep warmth. Historians still argue whether the quilting bee's emphasis on communal production was primarily driven by the sheer scale of bedding needed for large families, or by the inherent social benefits of group work. Regardless, as you feel the gentle, rhythmic motion of the quilters, you can almost feel the slow, steady build-up of warmth, a testament to practical ingenuity and enduring human need for comfort. As you continue to observe, you realize that these quilts were more than just objects of warmth or utility. They were tangible threads connecting generations, silent witnesses to family histories, passed down from mother to daughter, grandmother to grandchild. Each stitch held not just fabric, but a piece of the past, a story whispered through time. Imagine a quilt, perhaps one you see being worked on now, eventually draped over a cradle, comforting a newborn. Years later, that same quilt might accompany a child to bed, a familiar presence through countless nights. It would then, perhaps, be folded and put away, only to resurface for a special occasion, or passed on to a newlywed couple as a symbol of domesticity and comfort. The faint scent of lavender, or the lingering aroma of wood smoke, might cling to its fibers, evoking memories long past. These weren't disposable items. They were family heirlooms, imbued with sentiment and the quiet power of continuity. Every patch, every faded print, could trigger a memory. This piece was from your grandmother's wedding dress, a mother might tell her child, tracing a finger along a yellowed scrap of silk. And this blue one, that was from the shirt your father wore when he built this very house. The quilt became a living archive, a tactile repository of shared experiences, a way for stories to be told without words, simply through the act of touch and remembrance. It provided a physical link to ancestors, to the lives they lived, and the challenges they overcame. One mainstream historical fact is that quilts were frequently passed down through families, serving as important pieces of material culture that connected different generations. A quirky tidbit you might notice is the way some of the women, as they work, might gently run their hands over finished sections, almost as if caressing the memories stitched within. It's a gesture of profound affection and connection. Historians still argue whether the practice of naming quilts, often after the person who commissioned or primarily worked on them, was a way to honor the maker or to bestow a unique identity upon a beloved family possession. Regardless, the quiet reverence with which these quilts are handled speaks volumes about their significance, not just as textiles, but as cherished legacies. It's a comforting thought, isn't it, that something as simple as a blanket can hold such deep, enduring meaning, warming not just the body, but the very soul of a family for generations. As the last vestiges of twilight fade from the sky, replaced by the soft, ethereal glow of the rising moon and the steadfast flicker of candles, the quilting bee begins its slow, natural wind down. The earlier energetic hum of activity gently softens, the individual voices becoming less distinct, blending into a soothing murmur. It's a gradual unwinding, not an abrupt end, reflecting the unhurried pace of life itself in this bygone era. You notice hands moving a little slower now, stitches perhaps becoming slightly less frequent. The intense focus that marked the earlier hours gives way to a more relaxed, contemplative mood. The conversation shifts, too, from practical discussions to more reflective chatter. Perhaps a woman recounts a gentle memory from her childhood, or shares a quiet hope for the coming harvest. The shared silence becomes more prominent, comfortable rather than awkward, punctuated by the soft sounds of fabric shifting or a sigh of contentment. The scent of warm beeswax from the candles grows a little stronger, mixing with the fading aroma of the shared meal, creating a truly peaceful atmosphere. The quilting frame, once a hive of constant motion, now holds a nearly completed work. Its almost finished state is a quiet testament to the collective effort, a visual representation of a shared accomplishment. The satisfaction in the room is palpable, a quiet pride in the beauty and utility of what they have created together. You can feel the sense of peaceful closure settling over the room, like a soft blanket being drawn up to your chin. It's a feeling of tasks well done, of connections deepened, and of a day gracefully concluded. One mainstream historical fact is that social gatherings in colonial times often followed the rhythms of natural light and the demands of farm life, winding down as evening fully set in. A quirky tidbit you might observe is the way a woman might carefully fold a small, unfinished piece of her personal work, tucking it away with a gentle pat, a silent promise to continue another day. Historians still argue whether the late-night hours of quilting bees, often extending into the dark, were a deliberate attempt to maximize productivity or simply a reflection of the deep social hunger that these events fulfilled. Regardless, the waning light and the gentle tapering of activity create a profoundly calming ambience, preparing everyone, including you, for a restful conclusion to the evening. Finally, the moment of quiet departure arrives. The candles flicker, casting elongated, dancing shadows that stretch and sway like sleepy figures on the walls. One by one, the women gather their belongings, their small sewing kits, perhaps a half-finished embroidery project, or a little bundle of fabric scraps for future use. The goodbyes are soft, murmured, devoid of urgency. Hugs are exchanged, quiet promises to meet again soon, perhaps at the next bee, or simply during a chance encounter at the market. You step back outside into the cool, crisp night air. The moon is higher now, bathing the landscape in a soft, silvery glow. The sounds of the settlement are hushed, the distant bark of a dog, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, perhaps the faint hoot of an owl. You look back at the small, timber house, now a warm beacon of light in the deepening darkness, and you carry with you the lingering sensation of the day, the gentle hum of conversation, the comforting scent of beeswax and warm cloth, the rhythmic pulse of needle and thread. The quilt, now finished or nearly so, remains inside, a tangible symbol of shared labor, community, and the quiet resilience of life in early America. It will soon provide warmth and comfort to a family, a silent testament to the bonds forged over shared stitches and whispered stories. You realize that the simple pleasures of these quilting bees were not just simple, but profound, weaving together the practical with the emotional, the necessary with the beautiful. And now, as you walk away, the sounds of the historical world begin to softly fade. The distant hoot of the owl seems further, the rustle of leaves quieter, almost imperceptible. The images of flickering candlelight and busy hands gently recede, replaced by a deep sense of stillness. You are leaving that world behind, slowly, gently, carrying only the warmth it imparted. The soft hum of voices, the rhythmic pull of thread, the comforting scent of wood smoke and old fabric, they are dissolving now, like a wisp of mist in the morning sun. Let that peaceful warmth spread through you, a quiet comfort that settles deep within. Allow your thoughts to slow, to become as calm and even as the stitches in a well-loved quilt. Feel yourself drift, slowly, gently, into the quiet, dark comfort that awaits.